Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Nope, that was the wrong way around. Afternoon comes before evening. My name's Adam Childs with Kieren Lefebvre. I was right before we started recording, I was like, Kieren, watch this, check out my intro. It's going to be so good.
Yeah. And then
that's why Kieren does most of the intros. I'm going to take that button off you, bro.
too much power in these fingertips.
As I said, Adam Childs with Kieren Lefebvre back for episode number 72. We are talking about overcoming the fear of injuries.
Yes. Overcoming your fear of getting injured on the mats, off the mats, just in general, just in life, walking down the street. Now, if you have a fear of getting injured just walking down the street, I mean, you probably got one of those problems.
You know, don't step on the cracks, break your mum's back.
Yeah.
One of the guys in the gym was telling me about, like, you know, you said getting injured in life, and I just, you know, my mind instantly went to like the hurt, the pain that comes with rejection.
Oh,
and
right.
we've got this group of friends, right, at the gym, or this group of people, like, yeah, they're mentioned a lot, Dan and Jake. Dan still trains, Jake doesn't. But anyway, they're becoming the old seedy dudes when they go out trying to pick up young chicks.
Yeah.
Right?
There needs to be like an age cutoff from going to like nightclubs.
Yeah, that you're not allowed in. Like, you can't get in until you're 18, but once you're over whatever.
Yeah. What would you put that age at?
30. I don't know.
Yes, I'm still in.
35.
Yeah, once you're in Masters 2, man, that's when you're
that's
like,
it. Yeah, once
Masters 2, you need to call it a day, son.
And anyway, he told me two funny stories. They were recently in Byron Bay, which for international listeners is a very popular tourist town here in Australia. And they were there for a Bucks weekend. And they went to this nightclub and they said that not one single girl looked at them. These guys are all like mid-30s, like in between, like their Masters 1, right?
Yeah.
Like early to mid-30s. And he said that everyone in there was like 18, 19, not one.
They were the old guys.
They were the old creepy dudes.
Fuck that.
And one of them, I'm not sure if it was at this nightclub or a different one in the same town. One of the guys was like, all right, I'm going to do it. We're going to go talk to these girls, you know, and that's half the battle, getting the courage. And he starts walking over, doesn't even get within 10 feet of her. And she just sticks her hand out and goes, no. And he just like, and they were all like, I've never seen that.
Wow. Yeah, because it doesn't happen to young kids, right?
That's right. That's how do you get over that fear? I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah, you need another podcast for that. There's different podcasts you can listen to for that topic. But the fear of injury, this is a really good one. It resonates with me because I've gone through this period already in my very young jiu-jitsu career, my young jiu-jitsu life of I've been injured a particular way, and being in the same position scares the shit out of me. I've gotten over it now, but only just, and this injury occurred last year, like mid last year. And for context, this has been recorded.
Which injury was that?
It was the time at the park where I landed on my knee. And it was, if you haven't seen it, it ended up being okay. It was just like bruising, and I strained some fucking some muscles and stuff like that. It was no like tears, no ligament tears. But I mean, I got an MRI. It was that bad that I needed to get an MRI. Yada, yada. So you get the idea. So it was pretty scary, right? And the position was in no gi, and it was escaping someone's close guard by standing up. So, you know, hand in armpits or biceps, whichever you prefer, unless you like getting wrist locked, pop up, step back, push down the leg. So that's the position. It's a pretty common escape. I did that and slipped and landed heavily on my knee. So for like months after that, particularly when I was in no gi, I didn't stand to pass close guard. I would always try like the commando pass or like the knee pass or any other variation to not have to pass.
Have to stand up.
Stand up. Obviously now I'm completely over it, but man, I had that fear. There's actually a word for it in Portuguese. I don't know if we have a word for it in English, but that sort of mental barrier of you know, even when something is healed, but then still having that hesitation, they call receio. It's like that. Receio.
Oh,
receio.
Like, yeah, it's like that sort of fear of, you know, just not being able to go there yet, right? And I remember when I broke my wrist as a teenager.
Skateboarding.
And I remember when they took the cast off and the brief little interaction you do with the physio, and they're telling you like it's not broken anymore, it's healed. So all this fear you have of moving it and hurting it and whatever, like obviously there's physical sensations behind it, as in like certain muscles haven't been used and, your wrist has essentially been fused. So the joint needs to, learn to do its thing again. But, that fear of thinking, if you pick something up with it, like you're going to re-injure it, like it's not broken anymore, like the bone is healed, so you're good to go. But yeah, that fear of re-injuring something that's previously been injured is huge. But even just for some people, the fear of initial injury, and the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I briefly said this to you yesterday. I didn't tell you that how I got to this topic was from a very old friend of mine who recently had his first jiu-jitsu class. And this was, we grew up together, probably spent from like in our teenage years, I think we almost spent every day together. Like all we did was skateboard and smoke weed. Yeah. Like that is all we did growing up in Byron.
Are you sure you're not a fan of the Joe Rogan podcast?
Yeah, I know, right? Man, I almost said to him, because he's going down the current like addiction jiu-jitsu rabbit hole. I didn't say it to him, but I was going to be like, don't listen to Joe Rogan.
Oh, that's how he found jiu-jitsu, bro. No. Come on, you know it.
No, I didn't ask him how he ended up doing. Oh no, he told me just because he's a big MMA fan. So maybe there was some Joe Rogan connection. But anyway, this friend of mine, we spent so much time together in our youth years. But then life goes on. He's now he's a musician, a incredibly talented drummer, and teaches drumming and everything. Lives down in Melbourne. And, you go your separate ways. I moved overseas and whatever. And so more or less lost contact. He's still in quite good contact with my brother because my brother's also a musician. Anyway, he messaged me just out of the blue yesterday saying, man, I feel really slack. We've lost touch, blah, blah, blah. You know how it is life. He's got a kid now as well and blah, 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 blah. But I got to be honest, I'm writing you for a different reason. I just did my first jiu-jitsu class and, I knew that you had done jiu-jitsu or whatever, but, I like Googled you and stuff. Maybe not Google because I don't think I come up on Google, but he's like, I went to your web. Do I am? Yeah. World's shittest jiu-jitsu instructor. And he was like, man, I didn't realize you're like actually like, holy shit, you're like important in jiu-jitsu. And I was like, well, not really, but thank you. I'll take the compliment. Like I'm just a dude. But I was like, man, I didn't realize you're actually like, it's like your profession and your career. And so we had a chat about it. And one of the things he said, he was so addicted from one class, right? Like he even said to me, I should probably do some more classes first.
That's so good.
But I'm just loving that
so funny.
Instant froth. It. Like it's so good.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
But he did say, he was like, just that fear of injury, and especially as you get older and when you do, like for him being a drummer, like, if he hurt his wrists or his fingers or his elbows, it can definitely impact his work. And
even
for a lot of people as well, right? any physical job, if you were a tradie and if you hurt your elbow, right, it's going to be, what do you make some weird funny face?
No, I'm just thinking about all the people that I've injured that are tradies, and I'm like, fuck, man. Not this again.
Not many people just sit down and don't use their, even if you work in an office, right? If you hurt your wrist and you're going to be struggling to type on a keyboard. But anyway.
Yeah.
So that kind of got me to this topic of, well, how can you help minimize it? And obviously you can't completely negate it. I've said this multiple times and I said this to him, you could do nothing and you'll probably have more injuries, in the sense that people who are completely inactive and don't do anything, they're the ones that usually have lower back problems or all these other problems, right, with their body because they don't exercise it. So, okay, it's clearly very well known and established that you need to exercise just for day-to-day physical health, right? So if you then choose to do a sport like jiu-jitsu, is there more risk of injury than if you just went to the gym and ran on a treadmill? Yeah, okay, of course there is, right? But Is it worth it? 100%. But how can we help minimize those risks of injury? Step one, don't train with Kieren.
Absolutely. I will hurt you or you will hurt me. It's either way, it's a bad time.
I mean, I think in the beginning, and this for my mate, I'd be addressing someone who's brand new to jiu-jitsu. The most common injuries at the beginning are usually self-inflicted. So my advice in the beginning would be, it's easier said than done, but just take it easy.
Chill out, bro.
Because what happens in the beginning, if you train at a good gym, and I mean a good gym as in, I believe not many gyms now still live by that, sink or swim mentality. You walk in the door and you're just going to get the shit beaten out of you. Most gyms, I like to think, look after you as a new student, right? So let's say that's established. It's usually not your training partners that are going to injure you. You're going to injure yourself because it's a foreign sport. You're doing foreign movements, and you might even be a relatively fit, healthy, strong individual. But all of a sudden you're side control on the bottom and you try to do some explosive bridge or something.
And you throw out your back.
Yeah. And you throw out your back because you got 80 kilos on top of you.
Yeah.
And, or I don't know, like a super common one for brand new people who aren't looked after correctly, or even if the instructor does look after them, but then there obviously comes a point they got to do it by themselves. They do like a shoulder roll or a front roll incorrectly and tweak their own neck, right? Super, super common. Like it's usually self-inflicted. And even for experienced people, jiu-jitsu is way more dynamic than people realize. The old cliche of, the more you know, the less you know, right? Because how many times do you see even relatively experienced people like, someone towards their blue belt or even a blue belt, right? And they roll the wrong way and they rip their own leg to pieces or something. So in the beginning, my overall advice would be just like, really, if you're legitimately thinking like, oh man, like I can't afford to get injured or I'm worried about getting injured, you need to really take it down a notch because most injuries in the beginning are self-inflicted.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the whole like tap early, tap often comes in. Like that's the advice that I was always seeing when I was like a new white belt and looking into this sort of stuff. Because I wasn't really
advice you clearly disregarded.
No, I totally did. I learned the advice so I could learn to ignore it.
Yeah.
And shit, after you get a bit of experience and you understand how to escape certain positions or certain submissions, we should say, then you're, if you're a personality like me, you're more likely to push the envelope a little bit too far. And maybe that's ego, but yeah, suppose that tap early, tap often, don't fight a deep armbar all the time, every day.
Yeah. So there's obviously as well a few common trouble areas with the body when it comes to jiu-jitsu that are more prone to injury. And I would say, there's probably, you put it down to like three main areas, I guess, in the sense that you've got your back, right? We think about your back and your neck, so your spine.
Yep.
Then your arms, so like your shoulders and your elbows,
wrists,
and then your legs, so your knees and your ankles and whatever.
That's how the body's made up.
Yeah. Right? But like, you could go a bit more acute, say like, okay, like the knees and shoulders and elbows are more problematic than your wrists and ankles, right? Typically.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So, how do we avoid injuring those? Well, yeah, it's never foolproof, but understanding what causes those injuries helps. So how does a beginner typically injure their back or their neck, would you think? Or not even a beginner, but like if you think about most lower back or your neck, like injuries or strain. I don't necessarily mean injury as in off you go to hospital, but I just mean even straining it or whatever.
I'm thinking anything with the posterior chain, I'm thinking that they're lifting incorrectly. So they're leaving themselves exposed, like say, for example, they're like hunched over and their back is clearly rounded. They tried to explode out of that position, something along those lines.
Maybe,
or it could be on the other end. Maybe they're getting stacked.
That's exactly. So getting stacked is a very common way to tweak your back and neck.
Particularly if you're trying to explode out of it. Or
especially if you're defending it, right?
Yeah.
So, and the newer you are to jiu-jitsu, the less comfortable you are being stacked. You haven't developed that flexibility yet, right? It's not just flexibility in your back and neck. A lot of it's flexibility in your hamstrings and your hips, right? The better your hammies are, the less your hip has to lift to take your legs behind your head,
100%.
Meaning the less stacked you have to be.
If you can't touch your toes, being stacked is going to be difficult for you.
Yeah.
And you're 100% right. It's because of your hamstrings, and that tightness translates to your lower back.
Yeah, yeah. So understanding some of the causes for the positions and the injuries that occur can help you to avoid them. Elbows is an incredibly common one because arm bars are very common in jiu-jitsu, especially for beginners.
Yeah.
Right. So
you always leave your arm behind.
Oh, yeah.
And it's frustrating being that beginner, because I was there very recently. When you are that beginner and you're constantly being armbarred, like constantly, you get a little voice in the back of your head that doesn't want to submit to the same submission like 10 times in a row.
You're like, I refuse this time.
Exactly. And then that refusal leads to a lot of pain.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely arm bars.
But there's, I've said again in the past, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of injury, for lack of a better word. Any sport you do, you're going to have, you're going to have pains and bumps and bruises and, like this mate of mine, I said we grew up skateboarding. Man, I always had like grazes on my knees and elbows. I had sore wrists from falling and posting on the concrete or whatever, or getting hit in the shin with the side of your skateboard absolutely kills. So I mean, there's no physical activity that doesn't come with something. Even a non-contact sport, like I don't know, you want to be a
tennis.
Yeah, tennis, you're going to have sore shoulders I mean, there's a whole injury named after the sport and elbows, right?
Exactly.
Or,
tennis elbow.
Yeah. I think most people got there on their own, but, like you could maybe just be a casual jogger. Man, runners have notoriously bad problems with their knees and their ankles and their hips. So, a little bit of wear and tear and pain, man, like embrace it. Totally worth it, I reckon.
There's a very fine line in jiu-jitsu between dealing with injury and pain and being a bitch, And it's kind of like, say for example, you're sore from training and you're like, fuck, I'm sore from training. Is this something I can train through, or is this something that I need to give respect to and take some time? And it's the same with like little niggles, right? Say your shoulder's a bit tweaked. Is it really, or is it just a bit sore,
Yeah.
Can you train through it, or is it going to exacerbate the injury? That's a conversation that you need to have with yourself, and it is a fucking fine line. Flirting with that line is kind of like, it can be dangerous.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it comes with experience as well.
Definitely.
When you're new to the sport and you're young, you're in your teen years or early 20s or whatever, tear your ACL, wake up the next morning, it's healed.
Go for 10K.
But obviously as you get older, it's, a bit harder to recover, or, the is it worth it? It starts to swing in the other direction. But yeah, I mean, it is a conversation you have to have with yourself. Or if you're rolling in heaps of money, you could have a daily physio appointment or something. But, unless you're a medical professional, you might not know if it's an injury or is it something you can train through.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I think a good way to think about it is like this. You know how if you ever were homesick from school, or if you called in sick to work or something, and you would kind of be told something, if you're too sick to go to school, then you're too sick to, go to the playground. Or, if your parents would be like, if you're too sick to go to school, you're too sick to play video games or whatever, right?
100%.
And I mean, if you take that to a more...
Nah, Mom, shut up.
If you take that to a more realistic one, like let's say you did have doesn't even have to be a super physical job. Maybe you just work at a supermarket stacking shelves. It's like, and you're saying like your shoulder's sore. Is it that sore that you can't go to work? Yes, I know you could be, but I need to work because I need money. Ignore the monetary side of it for a second. Just like, could you go to work and do your job, right? Yeah, you could. Then it's probably just like a little bit of like pain and it's a niggle and off you go. You can still train. But if it's like, man, like actually, like I can't go to work, like my shoulders, I can't stack shelves. Okay, you might have actually injured it. I think that's a very, tangible concept for people for people who really aren't that in tune with their body yet and are asking themselves like, is this an injury? Can I train? Am I being a bitch? Right.
My litmus test is if it can be solved by taping it, you're not injured.
Yeah, that's right. Just tape it, bro.
Just tape it.
Just tape
it. If you like, for example, I'm like 99.9% sure without actually confirming it with an x-ray that I've broken my toe, one of my toes, my little toe. But I mean, it's incredibly painful. Hasn't gone away for like months now.
Yeah.
And it's just constant.
But it's fine. But that's also actually a good example because like unless you break your toe where it's like bent 180 degrees
what are they gonna
in the
do?
other direction.
What the fuck are you going to do?
They don't do anything,
exactly.
Right?
Unless it's like your big toe and you actually have to not walk on it or whatever.
The doctors don't do anything, right? Man. So, I mean, like, and something like a broken little toe, man, can take like months to heal, even if you don't use it. Like, because even not using it, you still walk a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, man, like just get on with it.
I kicked this bastard on the wall at Jiu Jitsu, like getting out of position, didn't know how close we were to the wall. I fucking smashed the wall like in January. And I kicked it the other day again. I'm like, fuck, this is just getting worse, man. Like it's so bad. Yeah. But who gives a fuck? Like it's fine. It's not stopping me from walking. It's not stopping me from training. It just hurts when I'm in certain positions, but you get over it. Like, is what it is, man.
But sometimes you do have, like you said at the start, like a traumatic experience and it can take a while to
mentally,
get over it.
Getting over that fear. And that was the knee situation for me.
Yeah.
I was scared. And I've been on the other end of that, getting like, I don't know if this is related, so maybe we'll save this one for another day, but back to the taboo subject that you bring up from time to time when I injured a particular person with a Kimura. Every time that I have someone in a Kimura now, I'm like scared to apply it because I don't want to injure them. So it's like, I'm not scared of being injured. I'm scared of injuring them, because of a particular way that I break a grip with a Kimura can be incredibly aggressive. So it like creates a slingshot, right? They're holding on as tight as they can and you're like snapping the grip off as hard as you can. And then obviously it's going to hurt someone.
Have you yet had the experience of when you're breaking someone's armbar grip and a slingshot's in their hand, punches you in the face?
Yep.
and if you still get the armbar, you're like worth it. But if they then get out, you're like
fuck.
I'll punch in the face and they got out. I mean, I think that as well comes with experience, understanding how to apply something in a controlled manner. That's why you don't want a brand new person heel hooking you because they really have no concept or understanding yet of like how easily they can get to tearing your ligament.
Yeah.
But before I forget, I definitely want to. This is more specific to my friend, but hopefully some useful information because I did tell him that I would tell him exactly what is wrong with his knee because he said to me, he was like, "Oh, remember how my knee used to lock out when we would skateboard?" And he's like, "I'm worried about that," and I'm like, "Bro, I know exactly what that is. I've had 2 surgeries on that." Right. So, bro, let me tell you the problem with your left knee. And it may happen training, unfortunately. Like it could just happen being active. I'll tell you what's happening in your knee, and it's to do with your meniscus. So if people for those who don't know what your meniscus is, you could think about it like the two bones of I actually don't know the name of the bone, sorry, but like your thigh bone and then your shin bone, where those 2 bones come together and form the knee joint, right? In between that, just to keep it very simple, there's a meniscus. There's actually 2 of them, but just think about it like there's a sheet of paper in between those 2 joints, which is your meniscus, right? And that's to provide cushioning between the joint. What happens when your knee locks out? For anyone who's ever experienced this, it's like your knee locks out and then you're like, oh, fuck. And then you straighten your leg and it kind of goes thunk and like pops. And then you're like, oh, thank God. And then it's like all this relief. So what's happening is as you bend your knee, the joint opens, right? opposed to when your leg's straight and the two bones are pushed together and they're compressing the meniscus. When you bend your knee, right, some space opens up in the joint. And this, if you have a little bit of excess meniscus, when the joint's open, that meniscus can then fold in half. And then when you and that's like you feeling like your knee's locking up because the meniscus folds in half and then gets caught in the joint. So now you've got, instead of one layer of meniscus, you have two layers, which is obviously too much. Like, you know, you can't handle that extra bit of meniscus in your knee. So it like hurts. That's your knee locking up. And then when you straighten your knee and compress it more, that fold like flicks back out and goes thunk. And that's when you go, oh my God, thank God. All right. So this is the injury that Nicky Ryan, his old injury that he's pulled out of this upcoming fight that he had with Jacob Couch, and his brother Gordon stepped in. So he injured his non-surgery knee, but his old surgery knee, he did this surgery to repair this. This injury is called a bucket handle tear.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Right.
And it can be something like that happened to my mate that would happen ongoing, like randomly. That's what happened to one of our gym members, Aaron, until he originally had to have the surgery. And Aaron and Nicky originally did the same surgery where they try to repair the meniscus, right? So think about like the meniscus has been smushed out, like almost like in a hydraulic press. Imagine someone put Play-Doh in between a hydraulic press and it's like smushed out. So there's excess meniscus and that's the flap that's folding in. So they can attempt to repair it by stitching it back down. And that's the surgery that Nicky Ryan did. It's the surgery that my student Aaron did. It is the worst surgery. It is like if you plan to never train jiu-jitsu again, sure, repair it. But it just ends up happening again in the future. The alternative is what I did, and it's what Aaron had to do. It's what Nicky Ryan is about to do, which is they cut off the excess meniscus. So then you have a little less meniscus now. So you could say you've got less cushioning. However, you don't have this flappy bit that can fold in between the knee joint. Okay. So this is a bucket handle tear. Bro, this is what I would say you have, because it used to happen when you did a particular movement, skateboarding, like a kick flip, where you're putting like external load on the lateral of your knee. So I don't want to scare you away from committing to training jiu-jitsu. It's a relatively common issue with knees, but you know, it happens with external rotation in your knee and hip. So maybe you could avoid those positions a little bit. I mean, those positions happen a lot in jiu-jitsu.
I was thinking, avoiding external rotation.
Yeah, but you know, you can to a certain extent, right? Like, you know, there's different ways to close triangles. You don't have to try to calf crush someone. You know, like I tried to calf crush someone, tore my own LCL because of the amount of external rotation I put through.
Joke's on you.
I know joke's on him because I still won the fight. But anyway, okay. You know, you can do damage mitigation. You know, like
it's kind of like the episode where we're talking about doing old man jiu-jitsu, you know, like.
Yeah. That would be a good episode for anyone who's resonating with this episode to go back and listen to. Let me bring it up on it, Jamie.
Jamie, pull that up. You'll find it.
Episode something.
Yeah. Nice, man.
Good save. You know, yeah, like there's so many different styles in jiu-jitsu. And yeah, if you're known as someone as having bad knees, like I do, I've had 2 knee surgeries. I don't do a lot of movements that require a lot of load on my knees. One of my other students, multiple students actually, who have come to jiu-jitsu from previously playing rugby, have destroyed shoulders. Rugby destroys people's shoulders. And so they don't do particular movements that are super aggressive on their shoulders, or if they're caught in kimuras, omoplatas, things like that, they're aware of their shoulder limitations. They tap very early. So everyone's going to have something. Like there is not one single person in jiu-jitsu, whether you're a beginner, professional athlete, 15 years old or 50 years old, there's no one who is like, I am 100% bulletproof and like every part of my body is perfectly in unison and I have no weaknesses anywhere. You know, for me, it's my knees. Like, I don't know if you've found what for you is your sort of like oh, I'm not great here. Like I tap pretty early with this position or whatever, or I avoid this. Everyone has something.
Yeah, I don't want to jinx it.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, be very careful what I say. Like, let's just, for sure. But I mean, every style of jiu-jitsu even has trade-offs long-term. Say, for example, your style is very like knee cut heavy. Well, you're going to have sore knees. If you like to play rubber guard, your knees are going to be affected. Yeah. Say you like heavy pressure passing. Well, that's, your fingers. That can be your fucking ears, man.
Yeah, it can be your face.
Yeah.
Your shoulders as well.
Yep.
You could play spider guard, destroy your fingers. And
destroy your grips, have gnarly ass grips. Or if you play a lot of like barambolos, that's all your posterior chain. That's your back, your neck.
Yeah, so... Yeah, I mean, I think it's also what's really cool about jiu-jitsu is
you can work around it.
You can work around your limitations, and you can also, do things to help them. So, again, not wanting to scare my mate, but, if you got bad knees, obviously doing things to strengthen the support structures of your knees,
Absolutely.
So essentially make your legs stronger.
Yeah.
That if the muscles around the knees are stronger, the knees themselves take less load.
Absolutely.
So there's definitely things you can do, but I like the point you just made as to how do we, deal with that fear of injury as a whole. Well, if you can identify what injury worries you, and then you can do a different style to
Absolutely.
that. I spent ages, that word I said at the beginning, Haseu, after my knee injury, because I had 2 knee injuries pretty much back to back. Actually, I did 3 surgeries pretty much back to back. I had knee injury, and then right as I got back to training, I was like, woohoo, appendicitis, got my appendix out. Obviously not jiu-jitsu related, like nothing to do with jiu-jitsu. And then not long after recovering from my appendix and I was back into training full time, like I did my other knee, it took me ages to feel comfortable to have load on my hooks with external rotation because they were sort of the positions. It took me years to get over it, so for a long time, it's not like I didn't train for years. I just didn't go to those positions. I did a completely different style of jiu-jitsu because yes, external rotation in your hips and knees happens a lot in jiu-jitsu, but
it doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to, right? Like, you could really lean into that sort of old man style, play half guard or deep half guard. There's very minimal external rotation in your knees compared to something like butterfly guard, right? So you can avoid it, right? You might even just go, yes, you have to learn how to play guard, but you could lean more into passing as a whole, right? There's way less external rotation happening on your knees. If anything, there's more internal rotation happening when you're passing. So you can do a lot to mitigate what is your problem area or where you're worried about getting injured. But with all that being said, you can never completely take it off the table. Like we said, you play tennis and you could quite gruesomely like injure your ankle playing tennis. Like you could roll your ankle to the point of breaking it playing tennis, right? What's another sport that's known for really bad ankle knee injuries? Netball, right? Because of the
stop start,
the amount of stop start that they do, So, man, you can never completely negate it, but as a whole, if in the beginning you take it down a notch to avoid self-inflicted injuries, very similar to when I'm asked, like, when do you think I'm ready to compete? I get asked that a lot, and I essentially say, once we've gotten you to the point of you having a good understanding of the mechanics of the two bodies, not even of jiu-jitsu, but as in like once you've got good understanding of things that we now take for granted as being experienced, but we forget that someone brand new to jiu-jitsu might not have ever really made that connection of like, oh, an arm doesn't bend that way, right? Like it seems so second nature to us now, but it's not when people are new. If they don't come from some other sort of, grappling or martial arts background. Yeah, they know that, but like they've never really thought like, oh wow, like if they've never done a joint lock or whatever. So once someone's past that initial sort of, I'm not going to do something stupid and break my own neck, yeah, you're good to go compete. And so sort of similar thing for beginners, like take it down a notch in the beginning to negate the chance of self-inflicted pain, because it does happen quite a lot.
Yeah, I think that's absolute sage advice. And another thing you could probably do, right? So if just stepping through what you've spoken about, if you identify your concern area, hypothetically it is your knees, then you could shape your game around not putting external, internal rotation on your knee, whichever is the problem area for you, or just pressure on your knees in general, right? Once you've identified that, you can work on a game. Then you could take it the next step further, like you mentioned, is strengthen that joint. Use like specific exercises. Like if it is your knees, look at doing some sort of dedicated strengthening and mobility work for that area. Maybe look at knees over toes guy. He's super popular at the moment. Maybe look at other, Kelly Starrett or other people that work on strengthening joints like that for sport, for grappling.
And of course, time's a factor. If you don't have a time to do that, even we say it all the time, the best workout is the one that you'll do. Mm-hmm. One of the guys at the gym, Alex, who came from rugby, he's got really bad shoulders. I can't remember if he's had 1 or 2 shoulder surgeries from rugby. But anyway, still to today, before every class, even if it's just for 30 seconds, he grabs the elastic band and does those rotator cuff warm-up ones. Yeah. So, it doesn't always have to be, man, I don't have time to do, 2 30-minute sessions a week of knee strengthening stuff. It's like, okay, but like
5 minutes a day.
You could, man, even if it's 30 seconds, okay, is it as good as 30 minutes? Of course it's not, but is it better than 0 seconds? Yes, And so if you can get into the habit of that, and I mean habit is in, let's say, I don't know, like a daily habit for me that is, religious. It's like, well, I never, ever, I can't remember the last time I fell asleep or went to sleep without brushing my teeth, right? It's just part of my daily habit. And you can do that with your jiu-jitsu too, is in, every single, it's like almost obsessive compulsive. I do these certain movements or warm-ups before I train. Right? And so you could take 1 minute, 30 seconds to do something for your knees, and you'd be surprised. It does help. Yeah.
There's a big difference. There's this concept in that world. There's a massive fucking difference between doing nothing and just doing a little bit. The difference between 0 and 30 seconds is astronomical. In comparison, because 1 is literally 0, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Even 1 second is still but if you think about it in that terms, you're not wasting your time, and you are, potentially making a change to that system, which is what you want.
Yeah. And so I don't think the fear of injury really needs to be there. Hey, if you take all that in mind, if you're brand new, chill out. But let's imagine you've got some experience, but you're still worried about injury. And don't go to those problem areas for you when you're rolling. If you find yourself in those problem areas, just tap or let them pass your guard or whatever. If it's too much torque on your knee or your hip or something. And if you train at a good friendly gym, they can be competitive and train hard without wanting to hurt you or without hurting you. And like you said at the start as well, tap early, tap often. It's just training. Sometimes you got to find out how far you can go, just not all the time.
Yeah.
Right? Like last episode where I had hella destroyed throat voice, right? Yeah. Looking back, it's like, well, I probably should have tapped, but at the time it was worth it.
Yeah.
If you're a musician like my mate, tap early with anything to do with your wrists and your elbows. It's super important for you in your day-to-day life. Right? And I think with that in mind, you shouldn't be too scared of injury, but you do need to be real. I'm not trying to sell you some
you
fake
need to be injury
bullshit.
Aware.
Yeah.
Not injury scared.
Yeah, they do exist. But honestly, man, compared to other full contact sports, I'm quite surprised at how low injuries are in jiu-jitsu. Honestly, compared to rugby, even non-contact sports like basketball have huge injuries. Man, football, is in soccer, which is a non-contact sport. Those dudes
ankles, knees.
Break their knees and ankles all the time.
Yeah.
And then it's not Muay Thai, you're not getting elbowed and kicked in the head and getting concussions. And, I find it quite low injury for a full contact sport.
I mean, it's the gentle line. Come on. Jiu-jitsu, right. The gentle line.
It's so gentle. We do it all so nice. No strength.
Let's cuddle.
Just gentle.
Well, on that note, that's a good place to end it.
I'll let you do the outro, Kieren, because my intro was pretty good.
Yeah, you set a very high standard.
Can I try again?
You raised the bar.
I'm doing
Absolutely.
it. I'm trying next episode.
Sure. Stay tuned for that. But thank you so much for listening to the Beyond Jiu-Jitsu podcast. This was episode number 72, Overcoming the Fear of Injury. Hopefully we helped you overcome your fear of injury.
And I'd actually like to hear if anyone has a specific injury that they're still having that heseu, that sort of mental block, even though they've had medical professionals tell them like, man, the ligament's not torn anymore. Like you're good to go.
Yeah.
Like Eddie's 100% mechanically in there, but they still got that. I'd be interested to hear if people have still got any of those hesitations or fear of not just injury as a whole, but fear of if they've had a particular injury. Actually, I'll finish. I know we're doing an outro, but one anecdote. I shot once on this guy in the gym, and I shot and I can't remember exactly what happened. I think my head was hella postured and I got really good penetration. So I'd gone, to give an eyebrow. And whenever I say, it's so common in like wrestling to say like, talk about penetration.
Yeah.
Like people are like, yeah, penetration.
So you shot and got penetration?
Yeah. And when he sprawled, instead of like the sprawl being on the back of my head and like collapsing me to turtle, the sprawl was like on my face and it like snapped my head like backwards and like folded me in half backwards. Bro, it took me so long to get over the fear of shooting again.
Yeah, right.
So long. And then just the other week, who was I training with? Jack, I think. And we both shot at the same time and missed headbutting each other by a millimeter. And I was like, oh man, it's always like one of my biggest ones if I shoot and he shoots at the same time. I don't know how MMA guys get over that fear of shooting and not copping a knee to the face.
Well, yeah, some of them do.
Anyway.
Ask Ben Askren.
Yeah. Anyway, the gentle art.
Thanks for listening, guys. Until next time, see ya.